Gentlemen, I would like to express my gratefulness to be here. It is something very, very important for me. I appear in this conference on behalf of the World Federation of Hungarians, the biggest Hungarian civil organization, and I was trusted, our president, Miklos Patrubány, to be here, and I give his warm greetings to the conference. Personally, about myself, it is not a merit in itself to be in old age. It is not a merit. But I am only 82 years young. Not old, young. And anyway, I am born Hungarian. I am living right now in my birth town, which is Budapest. I was a lawyer in Hungary. Later, I have become an American lawyer in the state of New York. But after that, I went to the Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty in Munich, and I was a senior program editor for 20 years. But after that, I have written 22 books about these topics. Now, what I would like to emphasize in my short contribution. This year, on 15 June 2020, the Rockefeller Foundation published its program called the National COVID-19 Testing Action Plan. In this document, the foundation defines the strategy for the steps that need to be taken to open workplaces and restart community life. It's very interesting. Rockefeller Foundation. However, contrary to what the plan's name suggests, these steps do not simply involve healthcare measures. Several prestigious universities, such as Harvard, Yale, Johns Hopkins, and others, took part in its creation. The authors outlined a hierarchical, highly militarized social model. At the top of the hierarchy is the Pandemic Testing Board, PTB, which would be similar to the War Production Board created during World War II. PTB would be made up of the responsible actors of the business world, the government, and the scientific community. If one reads the plan, it becomes clear that the leading role would not be assigned to the constitutionally accountable representatives of the government, but to the confidants of the financial and economic sector. The plan's federal board would be the front organization of the organized private power. Organized private power. Nothing to do with democracy. This high-level board would have authority over making decisions concerning the productions and service sectors, similarly to how the Defense Production Act authorizes the President of the United States during the wartime. According to the plan published by the Rockefeller Foundation, initially 3 million Americans would be tested a week. This number would then increase to 30 million a week. The goal is to make it possible to do 30 million COVID-19 tests a day, 30 million. The state would pay around $100 at the market price for each test. The Rockefeller Foundation and its financial partner organization helped to create a network that would guarantee the credit conditions and would sign the agreements with the suppliers. These are the corporations that produce the medication and sanitary equipment. The action plan finds it important to establish an organized called Pandemic Control Council, organization, Pandemic Control Council, which would be entitled to create a pandemic response corps. Pandemic Response Corps, a special power enforcement entity with the number of its members ranging from 100,000 to 300,000. The members of this enforcement power would be recruited from the volunteers of the Peace Corps and the AmeriCorps. This would be supplemented by members recruited from the National Guard. The members of the Pandemic Response Corps would receive a salary of $40,000 a year, which would be an expenditure of $4 to $12 billion in the state budget. The main task of the Pandemic Response Corps is the surveillance of the population with military techniques, digital tracking, and identification system at the workplaces, in the school system, as well in the residential areas, communal places, and the transport system. The strategic plan of the Rockefeller Foundation names Apple, Google, and Facebook as its main partners. The action plan explains what type of information would be collected about each person. Data would be collected about the state of health and activities, but this would be handled confidentially when it is possible. This centrally gathered data would then be handled on a digital platform and jointly controlled by the federal, state, and private companies. From time to time, the Pandemic Control Council would decide where to impose curfews in the USA and how long these curfews should last. The action plan of the Rockefeller Foundation was primarily made for the United States, but evidently it would be applied to other countries too. Whatever the fate of this action plan will be, even it only partially put in force, it would further centralize the financial, economic, and political power to a rather small circle. It is also evident that the public authority serving the public interest, the public good, would only have a subordinate role compared to the organized private power, which cannot be held accountable. Private cannot be held accountable. COVID-19 is an attempt of the supranational power to introduce global governance. The first phase of this pandemic was a trade war against China. In the second phase, The danger of an economic collapse was exceeded by fear, and the manipulations of the financial market. The third phase saw the introduction of restrictions, the imposition of curfews, and the paralysis of the global economy. The first phase did not result in losing the commercial ties with China, but to a certain extent it also halted the export-oriented industry sector. It was accompanied by racial campaign against China as well. In the second phase of the pandemic, a global financial crisis evolved, reaching its peaks in February 2020, which led to the partial collapse of the financial and stock markets. The global price of crude oil plummeted to a record low. However, this did not happen spontaneously. It could have been by professionals that insider traders had been previously informed. The fear-generating media that a huge role in the collapse of the stock and the financial markets. In February this year, the shares and stocks that fell in prices were worth of almost $6,000 billion. The savings of many low-income Americans disappeared, and many companies went bankrupt as well. This, however, served as an opportunity for big institutional investors to use their funds to buy up the insolvent company well below their price. This happened. They are facts. The third phase started in March 2020. The objective of this phase was to halt the world economy and transform it in a predetermined way through mass restrictions. The restrictions introduced in each state did not only paralyze the economy of that country, but also destabilized world trade, international transportation, and global investment activity. A world-scale strategy against mankind has been put into effect, potentially leading to extensive global unemployment and impoverishment. To make this tragedy successful, those in control had to make the people believe that these restrictions were needed in order to tackle the health crisis. It is the task of the politicians and the financial oligarchy, including the super-rich philanthropists, to carry out the global restructuring of the world economy, which entails the world-scale hibernation of the economic activity too. The Democrats are hindering the restart of economic life because it does not serve their interest in the presidential campaign. Therefore, the supranational power called big money or deep state has an ambivalent approach to restarting the economy. The big money wanted politicians to keep the people in quarantine, restrict their movement, and postpone the restart of the national economies for as long as possible. They were also expected to secure the support of the people by an exaggerated campaign of fear. Politicians serving the supranational power are also led by herd instinct. What is even worse is that some of them actually do believe the lies that the supranational power and its media spread in order to convince the public opinion, the herd. It is sad but true that lies in massive numbers will count as truths, and when politicians carry out the orders of the supranational power obediently, they start to believe their own lives. It's unimaginable. In fact, COVID-19 is not a pandemic, but a planned world-scale operation. Mike Pompeo, Secretary of State of the United States, made a very telling remark when he said that the COVID-19 is actually an operation carried out live. And Trump stood next to him. It is the real-time testing of a carefully prepared strategy. Almost none of its parts are spontaneous or accidental. The economic recess had also been planned. The leaders of the Pentagon and the NATO took part in the preparation of the crisis together with the intelligence community. It is not only about weakening China, Russia, or Iran, but also about destabilizing the economic situation of the vassal European Union. European Union is a vassal right now. A new phase of the global capitalism is in the making. The supranational power is switching to a system of global governance where decision-making is controlled by financial interest circles, including corporations like grant foundations and Washington-based think tanks, both on a national and global level. They want to subordinate all nation states to the informal global government controlling the world. I repeat this. They want to subordinate all nation states to the informal global government controlling the world. The coronavirus pandemic is transforming the structure of the world economy. It weakens small and medium-sized businesses on a global level and restricts whole sectors in the global economy, including aviation, tourism, retail, and the production of consumption goods until they go bankrupt. It has geopolitical goals too. The coronavirus pandemic affects the Middle East wars conducted by the United States and the NATO in Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, Yemen, Iran, and Venezuela are also targeted. Due to the prolonged restrictions and quarantines, people's fundamental resources have been disconnected from the production processes. The value-generating real economy has been halted for a longer period. This has, of course, paralyzed the normal reproduction of the economic life and other life functions. This not only concerns the production of essential goods, such as food, health services, education, or housing, but it also entails the reproduction of social relations, political institutions, cultural life, and national identity. At the peak of the pandemic, the nations of the world saw that it was not only the economic life that got paralyzed, but the whole structure of social life, including state institutions. It has turned out that the supranational power, which is organized private power, wants to privatize the state activity to all over the world. The key organization of the mainstream media, which are in private ownership, do not report about the fact that the super-rich financial oligarchs and the institution of the financial system owned by them are waging an ever more apparent war against the value-generating real economy. It is a huge advantage for them in this financial economic war that their privately controlled financial system credits both the states and the companies operating in the real economy. As a consequence, the oligarchs of the big money, who are of course owners of the bank system too, are the creditors and the actors of the value-generating real economy are the debtors. They are the debtors. This makes it possible for the super-rich financial oligarch to get rid of the small and medium-sized companies. With the help of the planned pandemic, the supranational financial power could paralyze global companies that included the biggest aviation companies, hotel chains, high-tech labs, global trade networks, and import-export companies. These are now all on the verge of the bankruptcy. The elite exercising the supranational power would like to get rid of the nation state and its democratically controlled institutions. It would like to transform the national economies into an open economic area, which is governed by the interest of the global ruling elite. The local wars all used to serve this strategic goal. This situation has changed insofar in 2020. It is not necessary to send troops to the countries. It is enough if the servile local governments halt the economic life under the pretense of health and humanitarian reasons. This goal was served previously by the responsibility to protect program, when the self-determination left for the nation states was eliminated without military intervention. By June 2020, it has become reality that more than half of the world economy has been paralyzed. This also shows that this is an imperial strategy being carried out on a global scale. The global elite wants to be the owner of the world economy through the privatization of the nation states. This was prepared by the conscientiously planned and executed indebtment of the nation states. The main representatives of the privately owned financial system are naturally the Wall Street, the City of London, the military-industrial complex, the big pharma, and the big oil. This is supplemented by the privately owned mass media and digital communication. It seems that in September 2020, the second wave of the pandemic has arrived. In propaganda, not early. Now it can be seen that global pandemic caused by the new coronavirus is an imperial strategy to create control over the entire populations. The strategy is controlled by the network of a super-rich financial oligarchic group. Global capitalism is defeating national capitalism. The Talmudist system, based on limitless selfishness, has managed to create the most extreme financial and income relations in world history. The global ruling elite wants to consolidate this situation. There is a centrally controlled global order in the making that wants to rule the economies of the nation states and all the companies operating in the world. If we want to stop this process, we have to learn about the leaders. This is the important. About the leaders of the supranational power. Who are they? This is the most important question. Who are they? And because we don't know who are they, we can resist them. There is no need to name the super-rich oligarchs to be able to identify them. They are controlling the structures and networks of the organized private power, violating established norms of international law. And within this supranational power, there is an ongoing fight for bigger influence. However, the main actors are similar in that way. They all want a unipolar global order where self-interest can prevail unrestrictively. Repeat. They all want a unipolar global order where self-interest can prevail unrestrictively. We are told we need sustainable development and so on. But sustainable development is impossible. We don't need sustainable development. We need sustainable resources. This is what we need. We would only like to mention here that a financial system based on interest is said to have forced growth. Our Earth, however, is a finite system where no subsystem can work infinitely and grow infinitely. It is impossible. It doesn't make sense. The most important cause of environmental pollution is the military industry. And the use of its products, the nice little wars, always, at present. The fight against environmental pollution should start with restricting and stopping the military industry complex in the first place. Because the existence of the military industry is the biggest source of the environmental pollution. Just imagine the most energy, the most talented people, everything, and they have no useful at all, because what is the useful of a nuclear bomb? It is better that we are not using, okay? But a lot of money, a lot of energy. Okay. Agenda 2021, which is a supplementary to the Agenda 2030, will officially be declared in Davos in January next year, 2021. This is the time when the World Economic Forum will publish its manifesto. The Great Reset. This is the name of it, the title of it. The Great Reset. The global strategy announced here actually started in January 2020, this year, with the launch of the global pandemic caused by the new coronavirus. This strategy had been developed for decades. The Rockefeller report, published 10 years ago, 2010, and the related meeting on 18 October last year, called Event 201, which was a simulation of this coronavirus circus, was one apparent element of this preparatory work. In our century, criminal liberalism has gained world power. This liberalism does not secure freedom for all, but limitless freedom for the privileged to misuse freedom. Freedom for misuse the freedom of others. Through the help of the degenerated liberalism, the global ruling elite wants to consolidate the unipolar world created by them. The goal is to create a worldwide chaos so that after the global cleanup, the global elite can consolidate its rule over the threatened people. The supranational power wants to stabilize a unipolar global order through a universal force culture where the strong can do anything against the weak with impunity. Therefore, nations holding on their national culture and identity, they have to stand up and refuse to put on this universal intellectual straitjacket. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Beautiful.